Always thank you to Regula. It has been a very contemplative 2 days here, I have to tell you. And a lot of things have come to me about myself. And I can only share my own life with you. I can't share scriptures. I can't share sutras. I can't share those truths of other people. I could, but it wouldn't be authentic for me. I can agree with some of the truths, of course. But I think life gives us the experience of our own truth or not. I was sharing with Regula, and I had a very deep contemplation as I went into town today. And I had quite a lovely day with a friend, and did a little shopping and walking, and just contemplating our lives as Western people, and how very, very privileged we are. Yet, we're some of the most miserable people I've ever met in the world. Those that live on this side of the third world. And so I was just contemplating with myself, and myself included, how I can make such big catastrophes out of nothing, out of worrying, really when it comes down to nothing. Nothing to do with survival. Nothing to do with, I have to save my family from not having enough food or water, or let's just go to Kathmandu. But yet our minds make us crazy. And I hear so many, many stories, including my own story. So when I speak, I'm not speaking about just other people, I'm speaking about myself also. I'm going to relate a very truthful story about me that I have related to Regula. And we were just talking yesterday afternoon and just chatting about life and fame and fortune, power, money, all of those things that we are all tested in the West. Do you realize most of the world is not even tested in that? They're not tested in money, nor in power, nor in fashion, nor in competition or challenge, or anything that we are, because they live on a survival level. So they're not even contemplating that. It's like, if I don't go to work in the fields, I won't bring home food for my children. And I was talking to a friend that was so lamented in Los Angeles about her boyfriend and her getting a divorce or not, and the boyfriend and her and the money and all this stuff. And it was becoming so catastrophic to her life. It was destroying her health, everything. And I said, okay, stop. Let us pretend we're holding a child in our arms. And we cannot feed that child. And we watch that child die. Because we can't get food for that child. And it happens. And it happens all the time. And so and I said to her, do we really have problems? We get so out of perspective. And I was laughing because when I was a child, my relatives, I lived in Illinois, we didn't have a TV. But in the adjoining state called Iowa, my other relatives had a TV. And it was a state over, like 350 miles away. And so they were very, very involved in the 50s in soap operas. And I think, do you have soap operas in Switzerland? Okay. Most people do. India, very big soap operas. Every country seems to have them. And they were watching them, and it became part of their lives. And I can remember one time going to their home at Thanksgiving, if you can believe this, as a small child. And the TV is over here. We're having our big Thanksgiving, which comes about in America, giving thanks supposedly, but everyone just eats a lot and usually gets drunk. And we're sitting there eating, but we're watching the TV as they're sitting and eating in their soap opera on the TV, as though they were us. And I can remember when my aunties would call each other after the soap opera and discuss what was going to happen and what do you think, and did you know she did this and he did that. And everything was a secret and nobody was upfront about anything, right? That's what a soap opera is. That's why I know it started out with, I think the people that supported the TV show sold soap. That's why I think it became a soap opera, because the commercials were all soap or soap-related products, shampoos and washing machines and all that. So it just got coined as a soap opera. And I started thinking a lot about soap operas and asking myself, how much do we live in a soap opera? And then you take your last breath. Still in a soap opera? Usually not. Usually in that last breath, you see it all in front of you. But there's no time. There's no time to forgive. There's no time to love or be loved or love yourself. It's all over with until you come back again. It's time. It's time for all of us. Whose dog is that?
Cookie.
Oh, it's another one. Oh, so darling. We love dogs. Oh, it's a little one. It's really time, my dear friends, my dear brothers and sisters, to really do your healings now. We do not know how many breaths we all have. We all were born with X amount of breaths. And to live with resentment, to live with a non-forgiving heart, to not self-love, it's so detrimental to your health. And like when we came together, was it yesterday that talked? Yeah. And talked about collective consciousness of what we could do in this room to help bring a peace and a wholeness to the world. Well, that's a big part of it. And I was with a friend in New York, and I was just relating very deeply, as girlfriends do, of how I have resentments in my life. I have not made amends, like in the 12-step program. If any of you know the 12 steps, the fourth step is to make amends. To everybody that you did not make amends or do a healing with. That part of the steps to recovery is to make amends, either by a phone, in person, a letter. Perhaps that person has even passed, so you didn't get that chance to say, I'm sorry. You can still do it on another level. And I've never done 12-step because when I was supposedly a drug addict, although I never even thought that I was, and then I just stopped like that when I took my first Kundalini yoga class, we just thought we were soul searchers, God searchers, and we never considered ourselves of that nature. But I suppose when we look back, we were in the 60s. So I never did that 12-step, but I've contemplated it, and I know it well, and I've worked with so many people. And we actually have integrated Kundalini Yoga and the 12-step program. And she said, you must start now. You're 72 years old. And anyone that you're holding anything on, and any slight resentment, or some unfinished business that did not match your heart with theirs, you must do it. And so I started one by one, and it was such a wonderful feeling. I'm not done yet, because I can't get myself up to do it to some of the people, because I don't feel yet that heart-to-heart with them yet. Even though some of them I haven't seen for 10 or 15 years. Now, does it matter if their heart matches yours? No. That's none of your business. Because that's when you start the soap opera again. You know, well, I didn't get the letter back. They didn't return my call, so therefore, and then you go on your soap opera again. I can resent them, they deserve, I don't need, I tried, they didn't return. No, that's none of your business. Your only business is your own heart. And how you can open your heart in that love, as you know love, best you can know it now, to be. And if they're reciprocal or not, it doesn't have to, or it doesn't lessen your heart quality. Do you understand that? And just talking to a beautiful friend right here in the room and understanding that she's helping a friend who's perhaps passing quite soon. And always my question is that person at peace with passing? And so many times they're not. They fight. That's why a lot of people live really, really old. It isn't just because they're healthy. It's because they fight leaving their body. Our housekeeper from Mexico, who's a divine, divine soul, she's been with us like 16 years. She goes home to her mother in Mexico every year. And her mother is such an ill health in her 80s. I mean, barely hanging on. And I said one time, go to your mother, several years ago. Her mother's the Catholic. And just say, Jesus is calling you. You can go home to Jesus. Well, she did, and she got help. Her mother was so mad and said, you never saw it like that, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, to realize she was hanging on with such resistance to life, which you can do. Or, a story I love to tell, I was in Costa Rica some years ago, and there was a gentleman who was coming to a week retreat with us. We had never met him before. He was an older man. He was in his 50s, 60s, a lawyer. And he told us a story as we came out of the big Catholic church in San Jose, which is the capital of Costa Rica. And I was very touched by the church. Somehow it just called to me inside. And not all Catholic churches do, nor any churches for that matter. Sometimes they give me the creeps because I feel battles, I feel wars, I feel not good feelings in some churches. But this church, I just felt so full of angels there. So I walked out and I was relating it to him. He said, would you like to hear a story? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, my mother went to Mass every single morning. That was her faith. That was her yoga. That was her sadhana. And every morning she did rosary. Come rain or shine, wind or storms. They lived in Ohio, which is a very, very cold, wintry place. And she got into her early 90s, and they said, Mama, we'll take you. No, I'm walking. Even one time she slipped on the ice, had to go to the hospital. She was okay, got back the next day. But it was her time to leave. She was maybe like 94. She wasn't of a dis-ease, like when my mother died. She wasn't of a dis-ease. She was just ready to pass at peace. So there were 6 children in the family, and they all came and gathered around her. They were distant all over. And she sat up in her bed, and she was a tiny woman, he said. And she gave her, and there was a young priest behind her to give the last rites. And she gave the most glorious speech of how happy her life had been, how cherished, how thankful, how grateful, and honored. And then, as in the movies, she would slip down, right? And he would give the last rites, and take her last breath, but not her. She was not ready to go yet. God hadn't taken that last breath. And so hours passed, and they all waited for her. She was very quiet with her eyes closed. And she opened her eyes, and she said, haven't gone yet. And so one by one, they took turns for about 3 days. And there were several times she'd open her eyes and said, I'm sorry it's taking so long. And finally she passed by herself, which is often the case. One person will go into the bathroom, slip into the bathroom, and you will go because you come alone. Even though you may think there's a lot of people around you bringing you out, no. You take that first breath alone, and you take that last breath alone, and that's the way that it is. First it's an inhale, last it's an exhale. But the quality of what you do in between is the quality of that last breath. And I think it's so important for all of you, and I know I'm probably, maybe not the oldest, but almost with that gentleman up there, that we have every day to be thankful. And you know, many of you have been to India, I know, or to Buddhist nature countries, Thailand and other places. And the sense of peace and happiness, singing when they're pushing a cart or pulling a donkey, carrying bricks. What they find in the happiness is what I talked about yesterday, that excellence within themselves. One time I remember I was with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and somebody asked him questions. It was a large group of people, not studying the scriptures, but a general audience of many people. And somebody asked him about what he felt about, what's that word, when you don't love yourself very much? Inferiority complex. And 3 different people had to translate in 3 different languages because he had no idea what that meant. That was not within the Buddhist nature. Within the Hindu, within those scriptures, because they don't talk about that. They talk about your love for God or your love for Buddha nature. But when psychology came to the West, it really messed us up. Because they started worshiping the mind and all your emotions. And they started creating so many stereotypes of human beings and so many mental diseases and so many causes and so many reasons that you had to figure it all out. And then you go to those people of not that intellectual nature, and they don't even know what you're talking about, including the Dalai Lama, and he's probably one of the brightest humans on planet Earth, because he's of true intelligence and not intellect. So, it's a decision you make to be happy. It's your decision. And if you're waiting for everything to get ironed out in your whole life, you might as well die right now, because it won't. But what you bring to your life, that's your decision. The attitude that you bring to your life, the gratefulness. You have no promise. Although in Switzerland you have seemingly more promises without earthquakes and tsunamis and hurricanes and all the elemental imbalances that surround you. But yet, you don't have any more of a promise than we do if we live elsewhere. Maybe your environment seems more safe and sound. Maybe your waters are better. Maybe you don't have so lack of water, and certainly not food. But you can always create mental imbalance that's even more detrimental than not having food on the table. And so I beg you to take your lives now and assess it, and to go through anyone that you have not a tolerance for, a non-forgiving heart. And I don't just say just fake it, go do it. No, go into your heart and ask yourself why. Because anything you think about anybody else, you can't think that unless you think about yourself. So it always comes back to self-love. Anytime someone bugs you, it's because you have that inside yourself. I can remember people would say they'd stop smoking cigarettes. And then they see somebody with a cigarette here. Oh, it's so disgusting. And I know within probably 2 weeks they'll start smoking again. Because that self-contempt that they smoked and watching it mirror them, they will have to do it because it will be a magnetic pull. That tolerance, that self-love, that it's so big that there's a book written that you can't afford. What you can't afford. What? Oh, the luxury of one negative thought. It's, first of all, it's not a luxury. But we were just discussing it before we came down to 7 hours. But you can never know what's running in your mind, really and truly, as you're going through the life so quickly, unless you sit in the morning and do sadhana. Maybe not our sadhana, but certainly the old woman who went to Mass every morning, that was her sadhana. My mother had a beautiful sadhana. She worked in the garden every morning. Something that takes you into a quiet space. Something that gives you time for contemplation and meditation. To regroup your mind, clear your mind, before you go out in the day and return to the same old habits. It's like a road in the winter after the rain and all the elements and nobody repairs it. What happens? It gets more and more rutted, more deep, until finally a car can't even get through it. And that's what happens. And when people get old and they get those frightening mental dementias, it's the rut of the old pattern that was not thankful, that was not grateful, that was not happy. You can choose. I remember one time my daughter and I traveled a lot to India when she was in school for 12 years in India. She went over when she was 6 and a half. So I used to join the group, the school, and go on their outings with them. And sometimes the housing was so displeasing. Children can handle, bless you. Children can handle displeasing dirty blankets on the floor in a vase in an old boudoir someplace. But for me, it didn't size up. Not that I'm fanatical, but I just didn't want to be like that. And so I remember one time they thought it was so odd, I found a little teeny room. And I just made it. It was just enough to get a bed for me and like this big. I don't even know if the door opened and closed. But I made it into a little temple. Because I just felt that you can make the best of everything. And it is really, truly true. That whatever you've got and don't have, and you don't have a promise, really. Last thing I wanted to close with, and not on a certainly scary bed, but just a mindful reminder bed, is if you do believe in reincarnation. I'm not going to do show of hands and all that stuff, because I do. I can remember, as many of you probably, past lives. It's pretty easy, and you don't have to be a psychic to do it. You love to go to certain countries, you love certain languages, you love certain foods, you love certain colors. Obviously, you loved being in that country in a lifetime. Other places you don't want to go to, they give you the creeps or the willies, you probably killed there, or killed people there. Because we've been killed, and we've killed 8.4 million lifetimes, Yogi Bhajan said. So everything you've ever dreamt, thought, and millions of more you've been. When I live a day where it wasn't right, I wasn't nice to people, or I didn't do something nice, I didn't help, I didn't speak words of truth, I was crabby to my husband, different things that made it not a good day for me. I made sure the next day was reversed because I didn't want to get in that snowball. Because I know where that snowball can take you. It takes you into depression. Depression gets to be a dangerous place to be because it can spiral down and down. And I know I've been there. I've contemplated suicide. I've not wanted to help anybody. I've hated life. So many things. But my mother, I always held strong with her. She would say, just go help somebody else. The same as Yogi Bhajan. Just turn around and help somebody else. Not wanting anything in return. No acknowledgement, no thanks, but just turn around and help someone who's more miserable than you. It really is a healer. But as you spend this lifetime, is as you will reincarnate back to a parent, a place, a gender, an intelligence, the health of your body. It all depends on what you do this lifetime. There's a bridge that when we go to Amritsar, we stay at this one housing outside of the town. We'll go maybe at 2:30 in the morning to get to the doors of the Golden Temple by 2:45. And we cross this one old, dirty, old bridge with no water underneath, just dirty. And there's always people sleeping on that bridge, just laid down under dirty blankets. Then they get up in the morning and they try to sell the little dirty trinkets. And I don't even know if they sell anything there. Who would ever stop there? And I always think, somebody ended up in that body sitting on that bridge. And chances are it was not that same person. It was somebody else. It could have been any of us. So don't get too that you're going to come back exactly in this pleasurable life that you have. There's no promise unless you spend this life in service. But I think more important than that is if you begin to go through your roster of anybody that you need to make amends with, or to forgive, or to find in your place inside of you that you can love again. And I'll tell you, the feeling that lifts off of you, you can't buy it for all the money in the world. The lightness that comes when you do something like that is, for me, it's the most healing thing you can do. Because what happens is you come into a self-love. Once you start clearing so much of that old garbage, you get lighter and lighter inside yourself, and you just love yourself. You know, there's that book, it's an old book, and the title is, maybe it was a musical, something about the lightness of being. And I always remember those words, the lightness of being. And to feel light inside. And I know many of you have experienced it. There's no feeling in the world as that lightness of being. So I'd like to offer this class to that lightness of being in all